The iPad Pro basically got spoiled yesterday, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about it because for the longest time it's been my favorite Apple product, and the reason I say spoiled is because my favorite Apple product just got way, way better in so many great ways. Let's begin. The reason I say the iPad Pro is so close is because they are very, very near approaching the software things I wanted changed to the iPad in order for it to become a Mac replacement for me. For many people out there, the iPad already is a Mac replacement, and for others of you, iPad might need some more hardware, or might need some more software additions to become a fully fledged Mac replacement, but the hardware that they've brought with this new generation of iPad Pro has never made it easier for this software transition to take place. So last year, when Apple announced that they were transitioning to Apple Silicon, they made this little Mac Mini dev kit with an A12Z chip. Same processor that was in that year's iPad Pro, and now that same processor was running macOS. It was running Final Cut and Logic, and it was doing all of the things a Mac could do with an iPad chip, and a lot of us took that as, okay, great, now we can actually get Mac applications brought to the iPad, some Pro class ones, and get some more Pro functionality of external monitor revamp support, and hopefully some more file management systems, hopefully Xcode and terminal commands and that kind of thing, but it never really came. And there were a few theories as to why it didn't come. A lot of people thought it had something to do with the RAM, or that, you know, that dev kit was not actually sold to consumers. Once the M1 chip came out, it was like, okay, all of these Macs have 8 to 16 gigs of RAM. Of course, they also can go up to 2 terabytes of storage and all that. But now that the M1 is inside the iPad Pro, we are now finally seeing 8 gigs of RAM standard across the iPad lineup, and if you're willing to shell out a bunch of money for the terabyte option, yeah, you're even getting 16 gigs of RAM. And now, once again, it's powered by the same chip that the M1 Mac Mini, M1 MacBook Air, even that ugly new iMac is all being powered off the M1. So now the transition of getting Pro-class applications on the iPad should never have been easier than it is today, knowing that they're powered by the same chip. And my real hope here is that at Quadruple UDC this June, we can actually get some of the big software announcements we were hoping for with iPadOS, which last year, not a whole lot of changes came to iPadOS in my opinion, and it felt like somewhat of a S year, like an incremental year for the iPad when it came to software. So I'm hoping that this year it can be a lot more major, and those Pro-class applications can finally take advantage of the M1 chip that is now powering the iPad Pro. And the reason this has solidified it, in my view, as being the best Apple product in the lineup, my favorite Apple product to use in the ecosystem, is now, especially on that 12.9-inch variant, we're rocking mini LED, okay? So we're getting the same great contrast ratios of the OLED iPhones. We're getting those peak brightness, those HDR, XDR settings, whatever you want to call it, so that the iPad Pro no longer has that fallback of being an LCD, which is what a lot of people viewed it as like, oh, it's a drawback compared to either the Pro Display XDR, which has a lot better dynamic range, or the iPhones using OLED displays. They can show a lot more variety in nits, they can have darker blacks and brighter brights, and now the iPad Pro is going to be capable of doing all those things, but with one major difference. It is still rocking 120 Hz ProMotion. It's like the Swiss Army knife of Apple devices, because now you can get all the great XDR features, and it's a mobile product, so it's not like the Pro Display where you gotta shell out $6,000 to get your hands on one. Now you can take it with you. It's reasonably affordable, but still has the high refresh rate, still has the great dynamic range, has cameras on the front and back, in my opinion, has the best biometric, which is Face ID, and it's the best version of Face ID because it works in any orientation. They've now updated that USB-C port on the iPad to be the fastest possible USB-C port it can be with Thunderbolt. That is a big deal, especially if you're going to be importing lots of files, or hopefully, if Apple listens to my video suggesting what the iPad needs, which is external camera support. If it's Thunderbolt, you could support real high bandwidth camera inputs so that you could live stream or record videos directly into the iPad instead of having to record them to a camera and then import them into the iPad. And they could be high frame rate, you know, high resolution videos thanks to that new Thunderbolt port. And on top of all of these changes that I was very much welcome to see, we're also getting Center Stage, which I honestly could see myself using a lot. Basically, they took the front-facing camera and made it 122 degrees ultra-wide, which is actually just a tad wider than the ultra-wide on the iPhone 12 and 11 series. They got got even wider than that, and then when you're FaceTiming and stuff, it can motion track your face so that your FaceTime calls basically have cinematography, which is not something I thought I wanted until Apple showed it to me, and now I'm like, actually, that's kind of amazing, and I can't wait to try that. Yes, the accessories for the iPad are expensive, and I know that compared to buying like a MacBook Air, it's actually quite a bit higher, you know, once you factor in the price of the iPad Pro, which now starts at $1,100, and that's the 128 gig model, smart keyboard case another $350, and then if you want the Apple Pencil, you know, this quickly becomes a $1,500 to $2,000 laptop, basically, because it is a 2-in-1. You can turn it into a tablet or a laptop depending on what you need, but yeah, honestly, the iPad Pro is stretching way above the price point of a lot of popular laptops now, but I think the key reason it's more expensive is because you can do more with it, aside from the software argument. I know that Macs have all this legacy software and all these pro-class applications that we use, but Macs to this day still don't have 120 Hertz, and at this point they don't have mini LED. They might have those later, but I guarantee you those are probably going to be more expensive as well. The iPads have the better biometric, in my opinion, which is Face ID. They have a touchscreen that you can go all in on with drawing or more interactive apps that utilize a touchscreen better, and in my opinion, it makes a more intuitive, natural user interface than just a point and click. iPads still have a cellular option, which MacBooks still to this day do not, and I'm not talking about 5G, I'm just talking about regular old cellular. We don't need those ideal conditions on the iPad. That's never going to happen. And the iPads have rear-facing cameras as well for document scanning or taking advantage of augmented reality experiences with LiDAR. Now you got 2 lenses on the back there. Hopefully the fact that this new iPad Pro with mini LED is a tad thicker means that it's less prone to bending, so hopefully that means that durability is a less of a concern with this generation. And now that it has the M1 chip, which is insanely powerful, close to as powerful as my iMac Pro, except now shrunken down into an iPad, I just really think that in order for the iPad Pro to be a killer Mac replacement, they just gotta nail it at June 7th, quadruple UDC, when they talk about iPadOS, talk about some new pro-class applications and some revamped external monitor support. Now is the perfect time to give the iPad some software juice because it's got a Thunderbolt port, right? It can output at a 6K resolution to a Pro Display XDR. I don't think, honestly, anyone's gonna do that. They were like, yeah, I bought a stand for my monitor that was the same price as my computer itself, but truth is, M1 still is really overkill for something like the iPad, and if it's capable of doing dual monitor setups, now both of them with extreme dynamic range, which is kind of awesome to imagine, if they can bring those pro-class applications to the iPad that the Mac has, and hopefully external webcam support, this is dangerously close to cannibalizing a lot of the Mac line, in my opinion, but because I'm such a big fan of the iPad and I want it to get more pro hardware, now it's on class with Mac hardware, and it's very possible the iPad will continue to get Apple Silicon chips in the future, perhaps get updated alongside the MacBook Air or base model MacBook Pros. That means that Apple has a long-term vision for the iPad to be a very pro-class computer, what's a computer? For the long haul, which gets me very, very excited, and it was by far the most exciting announcement of yesterday's event for me, and I very much intend on getting one and probably keeping it. If we don't get pro-class applications and iPadOS is just kind of lackluster, I would be tempted to send it back just because my iPad Pro can probably do everything this new iPad Pro can, just a bit slower and with a bit less dynamic range. But either way, I'm pumped. I'm really, really excited for the future of the iPad. I hope you guys are too. Let me know what you're most excited for with the iPad Pros moving forward. I think it's very interesting that this is the first time Apple has actually confirmed the amount of RAM these iPads have on stage. It's just one of those big pivotal moments where Apple is finally realizing that the iPad is going to be looked at as a Mac competitor or a Mac alternative in many ways. And before, they never talked about RAM on iPhones or iPads before. Now they finally are. That's a big deal for me. This is your Help Sheep here. I'll see you guys in the next one.